right, so here is the project that I'm sharing with you guys. All right, so this would be if we open up the project in Xactimate, what we would be looking at. I basically put everything in Sketch as the scope so that you can see everything kind of outlined here as to, what facets we drew our test squares on and where we had damage. And so as we're looking at this right now, we can see that when I went out there and I did a roof inspection, that the hailstorm came from the southwest direction, impacting the rear slope, impacting the left slope, and causing a little bit of damage to our right slope. But we have no damage on the front slope. So this is a hip roof. Hip roofs, remember, they have four sides. So that's important to know in terms of how much waste we're going to add to the roof. The shingle material here, as you can see, is a 30-year laminate. It is average condition. The structure was built in 2016, so the roof is only 7 years old. It has one layer. It has no drip edge, which sometimes you'll see is actually kind of common in the South because the roofs are a lot steeper and they don't have gutters. So they'll just have the shingle to where it's extending over that fascia and the water can just run right off. However, as we know, building code requires us to now have drip edge. So keep in mind, it doesn't have drip edge. So you'll see later on in this exercise what we do to account for that. It has 15-pound felt underlayment. There is valley metal. Valleys are right here. This is a valley. So if we zoom in here, this part here is a valley. If you go to a three-dimensional view of what a valley is, it would be this area right here where it V's inward. Okay, think of V for valley, where it V's inward. And then your hip is going to be right here. Okay, and a hip kind of is an outward ridge that's on a side of a hip. So we have, these are important to remember. This is a ridge at the very top. Then this down, like that V's down the center right here, is a valley. And then this over here would be a hip. Okay, so I'll put it back into the 2D view so we can finish reviewing all this stuff before we were to write the estimate. And we can see that it is a 7/12 pitch and a 6/12 pitch, which means that we're not going to apply the steep roof charge on the entire roof, but only parts of the roof. And you'll see how we do that later on in this exercise. This has 32 solar panels. There should not be an E right there. 32 solar panels. You can actually get a nice little aerial view of what this roof looks like. And you can see, oh, look at all the solar panels on the back. And then we have them right on here on the left side. If you don't count them when you're out on site, you can always do that using Google Maps or something similar. So we will go back to the sketch again. So we just went over we're right here at solar panels. And now we're down to 2 pipe jacks. They're on the rear and left slopes. And then we have a plastic ridge vent, continuous type. And those just run along the length of the ridge. Usually about 80% of the ridge length is going to have that plastic ridge vent, but the entire ridge and the hips are going to have the ridge and hip caps. So remember that your plastic ridge vent is not going to be the same linear footage as your ridge and hip caps, or as your ridges even, that it's usually only 80% of that. So you'll see how we calculate that when we get into the estimate portion. And lastly, we have 1 satellite dish that is on the back slope. It's right here in this area. So based on what we're looking at here, we have to then take this information that we see and say, all right, so we know how much hail we have in a test square. Now let's look at the company guidelines or the carrier guidelines as to how we're going to go about writing a repair or a replacement on this roof. So I went ahead and created guidelines for Unicorn Insurance, which is the insurance company that I made up. And I'm going to share those with you here. First, I'm just going to pull those up and see here. Wait, actually, I want to click the other one there. And then I'll change the screen. Here we go. All right. And so everybody now should be able to kind of see that we are looking at Unicorn Insurance Guidelines. Again, fake insurance company, but all insurance companies are going to have you follow similar concept. And that is the way in which they want you to write this estimate after you've scoped it. So we just saw what my scope was. Now we're moving over here to how they would like this estimate or even the entire project written. First thing is they want the claim rep and estimator being your name. So if you were here for day one training for this, you were able to see that that part we can find if we are in the project and we go to claim info tab, insured info, and go underneath the small little subfolder that is called personnel. Okay, you see these are all little subfolders that I'm clicking. It's the one called personnel, and in that you have claim rep information right there. Okay, so you just click on that. You could go into that. You can either add or edit, and just make sure that you that you're meeting their guideline, which is first and last name. For this, I do have my telephone number and my email. That will go. The same thing is going to go underneath claim rep. That goes underneath estimator. So we'll just make these blank. And a lot of times what you will see here is it will, after I put something underneath claim rep, it'll automatically put it under estimator. Not always, but usually. So we'll just go to, you can type it, the code that you put in there for it to populate, and you can see it did do that. It automatically went underneath estimator. So we have that part done. So we'll go back now to that guideline sheet since we just reviewed that. And we could see, okay, so that part is done. Now we'll move on to the next one. And I don't want to scroll that far. They say depreciation, age and condition, 75% on material only. Okay, so we're going to go back now to our project. And we're going to be able to adjust that underneath parameters, which is right here. Okay, claim info parameters. Now that we are in this section, we see that we have a sub-tab called depreciation options, where we can put in there to depreciate material only. Oftentimes you will get these where by default, its depreciation is on non-material and sales tax. But according to this carrier, Unicorn Insurance, they want 75% max depreciation, and then they want it to be by age and condition. Sometimes this will be on percent. You don't want it on percent. You want that to be on age and condition. And it's almost always recoverable with a replacement cost policy or RCV policy. Other thing it says, we'll go back now to the other screen. It says overhead and profit should be at 1010 when jobs will require the oversight of a general contractor. However, no overhead and profit tax required by, no O&P on tax unless required by state. So we have 1010 in our estimate because we are going to be having multiple trades involved. It's never going to be cumulative. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the estimate for you to be able to see that. It's going to be 10, 10. Never this is clicked, ever. Okay, that's whenever you're taking it even higher than a 10, 10 because it's cumulative, it's multiplied by itself. Don't get into all that complexity and just keep these at 10, 10. This unclicked. And then when it said to not apply overhead and profit on tax, you would go underneath this section called add-ons, and you would click sales tax, and you would set these to neither. By default, they're usually set to apply tax on overhead and profit or overhead and profit on tax. So you just change those manually. Each one has to be changed to neither. And then you click OK. All right, and then we'll go back now to the other screen, taking a look at this. And it says never apply overhead and profit to roofing trades, and don't apply overhead and profit to personal property. Okay, so yeah, it's pretty standard, pretty cut and dry. It's how almost every carrier is. You're going to use Unicorn Company header and logo. So we can go back here and make sure that we did that. And to do that, we have that under the parameter section, underneath report text. So I just minimized it so you guys can see it. And you can see here, yes, we got the Unicorn header. We can verify what that header would incorporate or include. And there it is. You know, it's the picture of the unicorn, an address, all their company information. And yes, it's what we're going to use. Okay. If they have an opening statement, do they have an opening statement? No, they don't. So if to remove that, we just say no selection. Are you sure? Yes. All right. So we will go back now to this guideline. And when applying your deductible, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Apply deductible 1% of coverage A. We're applying that deductible 1% of coverage A. We're going to go back to the project. To do that, we would go under claim info, coverage and loss, and we would first say, how much do they have for dwelling? Well, it's $450,000. So if it's 1% of that, then it's going to be $4,500. That is their deductible. Guys, down south, a lot of these properties, when they have their wind hail deductibles, are oftentimes 1 to as high as 5%, but it's commonly 1 to 2%. But typically, the less percentage that deductible is, it means the more they're probably paying on their premiums or have been grandfathered into just, you know, getting that 1% or sometimes even $1,000 deductible flat rate. But they do that because there's a much higher risk in those areas, and they're more prone to storms. So the higher that deductible is, they want to make sure if they're filing a claim, it's because of a hurricane, not a small little windstorm, which happens often when you're along the shores. So that's at 4,500 per the guidelines. So we would go back to the guideline again, make sure we got everything else set up and ready to go. Use the most up-to-date price list for loss location. Usually that downloads when you download the project. And it will come in as you accept the assignment. But sometimes you'll have to do revisions to the assignment, and you'll be using a older price listing initially that you need to revise. I can show you that too. So if we're here underneath the project, we would be under parameters, and this price listing should be the month that you are completing the assignment. So if you first got it in June, and now you're getting it again for a supplement, you want to make sure you update that price listing to August. And because of inflation and supply and demand and materials, those things do increase as the months progress. So we will now go back to the guideline again and apply separate coverage for code upgrades. Okay, that was another request on their guideline. To do that, it's very easy. We would do that under claim info, coverage, and loss. And if we need to apply a code upgrade like drip edge, ding, 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 because we do not have drip edge according to the scope, which I just reviewed with you, and we would go here to edit options, and we would add underneath additional coverage, code upgrade, do not apply a single limit, do not apply an aggregate. And it is an additional amount of insurance. Okay. What that does right there, I'll jump to the estimate to let you see while it's in your head. What that does is that would put this line item here underneath code coverage, not underneath dwelling. These are all under dwelling, but this one's under code, and it is paid when incurred. See how this box is checked? Meaning they are not going to, and these are all crossed out over here, how much money they'll be receiving for it, because they don't get that money until after they do the work. It's after that drip edge is installed they get the money. So because insurance is only required to pay replacement cost value on work that is performed. So that's why they pay it when it is incurred. Same thing oftentimes with overhead and profit. Just because they're not including it on the roof, initially when we write this estimate, it does not mean they're not going to give it to the contractor later on. However, they like to hold that kind of stuff back, things like code upgrades and things like overhead and profit, to first make sure that it was actually something that the contractor had to do in order to complete the work and actually did it. And then they will pay it out. So let's see here. We will go back to the guideline. And it does state that they want us to use the roof dura worksheet for all hail claims to decide if it is a repair or replace. All right, so the dura worksheet is used mostly for hail claims, and I'm going to now share that with you so you can see it. So this is your roof dura worksheet. And so it is deciding what is economically the best thing for them to do what is the most cost-effective thing to do for the insurance company. Is it to replace that slope or is it to repair that slope? So
Hey, Mike, did they give you this cost sheet or did you create this? Is this yours?
this is one of mine. I could I can send a copy of this. I'll make a note of that. So after we're done today, that I can upload that into Slack so you guys do have a copy of that. But it's a nice fill in the blank, gives you kind of instructions on what to do. I'll just make a note of that.
Yours is beautiful. Mine, when I did it in training, was ugly. Well done.
Oh, thank you. So this is used. This is a very common industry practice. The Hague Engineering, I'm also Hague certified. The Hague Engineering Society, I believe, are the ones that first created this to figure out, what is the best approach for us to take on repairing this roof or replacing this roof based on cost. And it's solely based on cost and condition of the shingle. And we'll go over that. This first part here, it says you want to enter the repair cost per shingle. So to do that, we will, I'm going to just create another folder, and we're just going to call this roof. And we are going to see exactly why I got $24.80 to replace a per shingle. All I did was, if we go back to the estimate, underneath category code or wherever you want to do it, RFG 300E, that is a per shingle repair. And how much that cost is, it states right there. It's $24.80. Okay. Sometimes I just take that number right from here and plug that into that Excel sheet, because when you press OK, it comes out as 2 items, which is fine. But you then got to go to unit price and get that overhead and profit off of there, and then get your actual number. And it's $24.80. There it is. So that is how much it costs to remove and replace one shingle. So then we go into the second part of the roof dura worksheet. And it says under this column, enter the repair difficulty factor. Guys, there are only 3 numbers that the Hague Engineering Society uses. 1, meaning the shingle is in good condition. Okay, that means that very little granule loss. It's a relatively newer roof. It doesn't have many installation defects. It does not have algae or lichens or much damage caused by foot traffic or any mechanical damage. This would be a roof that's in pretty good condition, and that would be a 1 factor. So that's what our roof is today. If you have a roof that has a lot of granule loss, and it is a roof that is maybe 15 years old, and it is, showing signs of improper installation on it. But it still's got some life left to it, maybe about 10 years, then that would be a 1.5. Okay, so that would be like fair condition. Okay, and then repairability factor 2 would be a roof that's in poor condition, a lot of granule loss, a lot of installation issues, has already maybe outlived its life expectancy. Shingles aren't sealing, so that would be a 2. And what happens with this number is, you can see if we change this number is a multiplier. So that this, whether it's a multiple, you're multiplying the cost per shingle by that repairability factor, okay? And if that is a 2, that doubles basically the number of shingle that you have to remove and replace on an individual basis. So if I change this to a 2, that jumps all those other numbers that I have for shingle I have to over here, for shingle that I have to replace individually, it doubles it. So you can see, so if you look at back roof at 171 individual shingle, that is if the shingle's in very bad condition, and I'm saying that there are 10 shingle damaged per square on the back. But that is how many shingle you would have to replace. You can see if I put it in good condition, that, okay, well, now it's just, it's multiplying the cost per shingle times 1 times the number of shingle per square on the back. Okay, so in this case, we are at 1. And then the next part here is, you would just put in how many shingle that you have damaged in each test square, not the number of shingle that you have damaged on a entire slope. So that will be factored in later by multiplying the number of shingle per test square by this one right here, okay, in this column, which is the number of squares that you have on the roof. So the Dura worksheet is multiplying the number of shingle per square times the cost to replace each individual shingle times the condition of the roof on a 1 to 2 scale factor, okay, to then give you that number that it believes, or times the number of squares, then give you the number it would be to do the repair. So you can see, if you focus in on this, you can see that it costs more money to repair the back slope than it costs to replace the back slope. That it costs less money to repair the right slope than it does to replace the right slope. And it costs more money to replace the left slope than it does to, it costs more money to repair the left slope than it does to replace the left slope. So using this worksheet, we are able to determine that it is economically more feasible for us to replace our back and our left slopes and repair our right slope with 22 shingles. I know that this is a little bit confusing. It's totally normal for this to be confusing, but I promise you that I will send you guys this so that you can use it and type these numbers in yourself, okay? So we will now go back to our estimate.
Just a quick second, Mike, before you do that.
Sure, John.
Can you toggle back?
Oh,
So
yeah, sure.
you're saying that in the one slope that repair worked, even though it was close, that 545 to 608, the insurance company is going to be that stringent and say you can't replace for 50 odd
Well,
dollars?
we have to in those instances, it's not up to us to assume what they're going to do. We would, if we're saying that roof's in good condition, then we are going to repair it. If that roof were in fair condition or bad condition, then you can see that even if it were 1.5, that we would then be replacing that right slope, you see? So
Gotcha.
we can't make those decisions based off of our something that doesn't align with our findings. If our findings say it's in good condition, even though it's a few dollars, then we still have to follow their methods.
Great. And they can then give way if they want to, but we're recommending their method.
Yes, absolutely.
Always. Nice. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. So I'm just going to change that back to 1, and then we will go back to this screen here. All right, and so and to finish, real quick, I didn't explain how I found that to replace per square pricing, we did the same way as the replace per shingle pricing, and that was just to press RFG 300 with felt, okay, and then just put 1 there. Just make sure you don't include overhead and profit on those. And you're able to see over here what that would be, okay? And it's $368.78. So that's how much Xactware says it costs to remove and replace one square. Guys, this does not include vents. The Dura worksheet does not include vents, does not include flashing. It's a key thing to keep in mind. Okay. Now, before we dive too deeply into this estimate, I think it's important for you guys to understand what hail damage is and what I said hail damage was in order to buy this roof, because it's oftentimes misidentified. So I'm going to share with you the, let's see if I can pull that up. Okay. All right, so this is a case study. This is a house that is not identical to the roof that we did, but this is from the Hague Engineering Society, and this is from their workbook. I'm going to show you just some photos of what I would identify as hail while out there to write for this roof, okay? So I will bring you down to this area here, okay? First things first, okay, so these are really good pictures of what hail damage would look like. You can kind of see that we still have our granules intact. However, some of them have fallen out, but not all of them. He has his hand behind the matting here to show that the matting has been punctured or bruised, which affects the service life of the shingle. And it also will affect the shingle's ability to shed water, okay? Just loss of granules alone is not enough to ruin the service life of a shingle or to jeopardize or compromise the functionality of the shingle. Here's a great picture on figure 3.424. This is a great example of hail damage, okay? You can kind of see what that looks like. And here, down here, figure 3.431. That's another good example. This is in a valley. He's showing in this valley. That's a beautiful example of a hail hit. Okay, so these are the kind of hits. See how he puts his hand behind it, feels the bruising. Let me see if he has a couple more over here. He's showing these splatter marks on the metal. Now, we don't have any metal in this roof we're doing today, but you can see the denting in figure 3.441. And some of these other photos that we're showing here. We will, figure 3.429 is another great photo showing what a hail hit would look like. Now, I will show you what simulated hail looks like, where it is mechanical simulation. It was done by a contractor. This is simulated hail, pulverized granules, figure 3.394. Pulverized granules right there. Okay, that means that they are literally so hail is soft, and it is not as hard as metal. At the end of the day, it is still ice, frozen water. Okay, so when that hits, it does not have jagged edges and it's not steel. The pulverized granules are an indication of a metal object hitting it. Over here in figure 3.4, this is damage that was simulated to look like hail by a contractor, but was actually a quarter. In figure 3.31, that is a quarter, gouging out the inside there. And figure 3.398, this was these are just broken granules, just a contractor sticking his thumb in there, okay? But you can see that this and figure 3.397, again, broken granules, which you'll oftentimes see done by contractors, does not follow the same appearance that we get from actual hail. Okay, so those are key things to keep an eye on. And oftentimes, if a contractor is damaging the roof, and it happens often, it's going to be non-random. Hail is random, but mechanical damage done by contractors, it's oftentimes going to be in the field of the slope, which is the middle. You're not going to see it along these edges. So this was a roof where they denied it because it was mechanical, done by the contractor. You can see circled in this picture. In this picture, this area circled, those were the only areas the hail damage was at. There was nothing over here, nothing down here, nothing over there. And abrasions in non-random patterns and miraculously missed the small sides of the roof. Okay, so keep that kind of stuff in mind too. All right, so we're going to go back now that you're able to see what we would be writing for as actual hail damage. Okay, we're going to go back now to our estimate, and we're going to kind of get the aerial image of it that you guys can kind of keep in mind here. We go to photos. That's what it looks like. This is actually my first house I ever bought in Destin, Florida, near Destin, Florida, and Baker. I sold it now, but because I live up in the Northeast, but I was like, hey, this would be a good house, I guess, to do an example on. Got a lot of solar panels. This is what we're going to see in Florida when we're down there. You got hip roofs. This is the ideal kind of roof that you will see. Ridge vent running along the ridges and that kind of stuff. So we're going to write an estimate now. You can see there's one already written up here. So, and this is basically a preview of what we're going to do together. So I will do it again here, and I'm just going to show you exactly how this is all done here. So if we are not writing for a full replacement, this can be a little more challenging than just putting everything in where you're going RFG, ARMV, and it's using the automatic calculations SQ. As you can see, when you do it this way, you are going to be getting all automatic calculations. It's all going to come in as SQ. We can't do it that way. We have to actually go into Sketch, and we have to write our partial replacement by first dragging these over top of the facets. So if we are going to be replacing this slope, any left-facing slope and back-facing slope, well, we would do that by hovering over the facet and clicking our left click button, and there it is. So it said F4SQ. That means facet 4 and the number of squares for facet 4. And that's what F4 means when you see it on a facet. So we're also going to be replacing F2 because that's back facing, right? We're saying that anything back facing and anything left facing we're replacing. We're going to be replacing F12. And we're going to be replacing F13. Is there anything else that we're going to actually have to replace? Answer to that is no. Any company that's having you use the Dura factor sheet would want you to do a per shingle repair for the shingle on the right slope. To do that, again, it's just RFG 300E per shingle, and you can just, put it there, whatever, and then change it down here to 22. That is the number according to our Durafactor sheet that we are supposed to be replacing for the right slope, because it said do not replace, repair. And so we go back now to our estimate. And I'm dragging this up so you guys can see those line items that we just dropped in from our diagram. They appear down here, which means they also appear in the estimate if you're looking at it in this version or in this view. Okay, so we'll go back to that sketch and we will see now. Now, something I like to do is, we'll see what this carrier's guideline is on the removal of shingle from a roof if you're doing a replacement. So we got to look at their guideline and see what they say for that. And let me see if I can open that again. I don't know where that went. Okay, here we go. Got it. Just gonna share that with you. All right, so it says use RFG E or RFG 240E when repairing a slope. Use RFG ARMV or RFG ARMV greater than, which means laminated, the tear off of laminated shingle or the tear off of 3-tab shingle when replacing a slope. So that tells us, all right, I got to go back now to my project and I got to change this item right here to RFG ARMV. You can do that by just clicking right there on the selector code. And it's going to be greater than, right? Because that means laminated. And it's not going to be for all the squares there. It's going to be for, oh, I wish I would have kept it like that before. I think it's going to be for, should be like 19.67 because we haven't added waste to this yet. Okay, so that's what they want us to use for that tear off. Again, it depends on what view you like. If you go to, your estimate view and you prefer that, that's fine. But we need to see that ARMV greater than symbol. And so we've got that entered in. So now if we're going to be replacing any slope, we have to add felt. Okay, code requires 15-pound felt underlayment. There we go. It's not going to be for the whole roof. So a little cheat code to fix that. You don't have to do the graphical estimating again, where you drop in each line item into the sketch. You can just use the same number you have right here. So 19.67. And put that right there. And we can kind of now separate these by putting these F9 notes. And this one will be, let's see here, right? Do something like that, add, and then you can say, this will be left slope. All right, so it's a real simple way to separate it because this carrier likes whenever you separate. So we're going to say this is right slope, this is rear and left slope. Because part of the roof we're doing a tear off and replace. The other part, we're just doing a per shingle repair. But we have some other line items to add, don't we? Well, let's see here. We go to our sketch. Well, guys, this is really the best way for us to be writing this estimate is in this view. And if you're not comfortable with it, I really highly suggest you get comfortable with it. And here's why. Because we're doing a partial repair. And we're going to need these measurements that we have in here to be in front of us as we put these line items in. I will show you what I mean by that. So for this next one, RFG, drip. Okay, so we got that, but it can't be P. P would be the whole roof. So we need to look at this and say, where do we got drip edge? Well, code requires us to have drip edge along the eaves and rakes. Okay, but did we have drip edge there before? Well, according to this, we didn't, but it is code required. So we are going to then say, all right, so I got to have drip edge then I got to have drip edge here. I got to have drip edge here, here, and down this length right here. So let's pull that out a little bit there. So I can see I have those measurements right there. If I'm looking, that'd be 40 or 43.8. That measurement right there, actually further, it'll be 58.8. So that's my first one, 58.8 plus, I zoom out, plus 24, right? We need drip edge there. Okay, drip edge, just remember, all around the perimeter. Okay, how about here? Well, we need that as drip edge too. Plus 12. And here, this whole length is 37.8. We need it there. Okay, so that, and I believe then we have all the drip edge we need. Oop, I messed that one up. It was 12 plus 37. There we go. It looks better. But our drip edge is not going to be remove and replace because we don't have it initially or originally. So that's going to be changed to replace only. And we have to then change the coverage. Remember that. Coverage would have to change to code upgrade coverage. And that item is going to be crossed out, as you can see right there, meaning it's still going to be on the RCV total and the estimate, but they are not getting that money initially. It's paid when incurred. And so I'm going to make sure that I keep these in bold and that I keep my line items that are with right roof and with rear and left slope with rear and left slope. Okay. And so we're moving right along, but we're missing one thing. We're missing ridge and hip cap because even though we are going to have waste on our 30-year laminate shingle, okay, we have to keep in mind that waste for laminate shingle does not include ridge and hip caps, okay? Because ridge and hip caps are cut from 3-tab shingle. So a 3-tab shingle is cut into 3 different pieces, each a tab, and then it's placed along the ridge. And that is why you can't include ridge and hip caps with laminate shingle. So you can see here that it might even tell you somewhere that it's excluded. It just says excludes roofing underlayment. But a good rule of thumb to remember is it doesn't include ridge and hip caps, laminated composition shingle, roofing nails, and installations labor. The waste on this line item does include, it's going to be 15% because it's hip, but the waste on this line item does include starter course for your rakes and for your eaves, and it also includes your shingle that'll be in a closed valley. That's what that waste is for. So I oftentimes just put an F9 note there saying 15% waste included for valleys, eaves, and rakes. But there's no rakes on this. Valleys and eaves. Okay. And we are going to then add our ridge cap. So we can just go to here and we can just say ridge cap. First one that comes up, hip and ridge cap cut from 3-tab composition shingle. This line item, because we're doing a partial replacement, is going to be remove and replace, because we want to use caution when we are removing that ridge cap that overlaps those undamaged sides of the roof, like the front slope or parts of the right slope. We want to use caution while doing that. So it's not just going to be torn off or coming off with the other slope. No, we're going to use caution. So that'll be remove and replace action. And then we need to make sure that we have that for ridges and hips. But what do we have to do? We have to go into our sketch and we have to look at the calculations that we see there to make sure that our ridge and hip cap quantity is correct. There's really no other way of doing it, unfortunately. So if we're looking at this roof, we see that we are first, this length down here, this for hip roofs, okay, this is called a parallelogram, where it's, you know, a rectangle at an angle like that. This is the same length down here. Down here is the same length as up here is the same length. If you're thinking, well, this says 14.6, it's saying 14.6 from here to that other edge of that hip, not from this point to that point. From this point to that point is 12, like it says here. So your first number, 12 plus, okay, what do we got for this hip here? 26.6. 26.6 plus another 26.6 on this side, because these shapes are symmetrical. 26.6, okay, plus what do we have for this hip? 35. So I'm going to say plus 35. Okay. What do we, oh, we got this one right here too. Okay. This is 12. So I go to plus 12, and that's for this length right here. See how it says 12 right there? And then we got this little area here that also has to be covered. Okay, that's 6.6 plus 6.6. Okay, we already got that 35 in there. We don't have this 16, so we got to do plus 16 plus this length here. What is this length? It's not showing me. It's the same as this length, 15. Remember that when you're ever measuring a roof, okay? Plus 15. And then we got to cover this hip right here, which is going to be the same, or not the same. It's going to be the same as this hip, okay? So plus 19. All right, right there, you guys were able to see, wow, writing for a partial repair is a lot more time consuming than writing for a full replacement. But are there any questions? John, do you have any questions or anything?
You know, I always do.
Okay, that's fine.
Did you buy this sketch?
No, I didn't. I created this roof. And so
Holy smokes.
what I did,
That's a tough one.
yeah, so what I did is, to be completely honest, I went to, I believe it was Bing Maps, which you can see here. And I simply said, okay, I need to figure out, I need to figure out some of these distances here. So, all right, how do I do that? Well, I can right click here, measure. So I can go from here, and then I can say, what is this distance? Okay, because that's my main hip. Okay, it says over here it's 49 feet. Got it. All right, then. Well, if that's the case, what's this distance? All right. Boom, 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 boom. And you can close the shape, you can, and then you can do whatever you want to edit it. It's fine. But yeah, so but yeah, that's pretty much how I did it. And I was able to kind of pull measurements that way. And then I was able to kind of create a roof using all that. But no, it was not from anything else. And I wouldn't have typically done that, but I did that because it's an exercise. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I figure, we're not actually turning anything in, but I'm sure that it's somewhere in the vicinity or plus or minus 1 square of what it needs to be the correct measurements. So, all right, well, back to this. So what
I got
we,
a couple more questions if you want them.
sure, yeah.
How would you learn the direction of the storm?
So the direction of the storm is very easily learned by first walking around each elevation and looking for your collateral damage. And so the direction of the storm is commonly figured out by looking at the splatter marks so when hail hits fences, when hail hits HVAC units like AC units, when it hits and then it makes a splatter mark. I will show you. And that splatter mark will give you the direction. So when when it hits, the direction that the splatter marks go is the opposite direction usually the direction that the hail came. I'll show you what I'm talking
I
about
got you.
here. Um,
So it wasn't through meteorology or something of that sort. You did it through evidence.
yeah, so that's exactly how I usually do it. So let me see here if I can kind of show you an example.
I'm remembering it from hail training now. I didn't have it in my head before you said it though.
Yeah, right. But yeah, that's pretty much how I do it. But it doesn't look like I was able to. Oh, here we go. So you can see here that, in this photo, he's looking for a lot of these HVAC components to figure out what direction it came. But in terms of like the actual section in the Hague book where he talks about it, looks like I'm not really seeing that right now. But
I get you with the splatter mark.
yeah,
It
yeah,
all
yeah.
rings true.
Or it's oftentimes on fences and things like that. Any other
Mhm.
questions?
Uh, do you do a list like that? Your right side, here's a pipe jacks, satellite dish, all that. Do you always do that list in the sketch next to it like
So I
that?
don't. No, I don't. There was a carrier, MetLife, also known as Farmers, that does like to see all this stuff outlined. I did this because it was a way of me to show you my scope
Mhm.
without me showing you a sketch
Gotcha.
or without
Thank you.
me showing you my scope checklist.
So
So
only one insurer really likes it, so don't spend the time doing it unless they require it. That's
yeah,
the
yeah,
plan,
yeah. I
right?
wouldn't spend the time doing it. Yeah, unless they require it. Yep. So
Thank you.
yeah,
That's
no
it.
problem. All right, so we know that this is a 712 and a 612. Make sure that you're back on the right screen here. You are. And so with that being the case, we know that we have only part of these that are a 612 and part of these that are 712. I'll tell you for the sake of saving time, the ones that are 712 are our front facing and our back facing. So again, what do we do to drop in then our steep charge? Well, we type in the code and the selector for that, RFG steep. Then we go to the slope, which is back, and I select it. To select it, you want to make sure you're hovering right over the face or the facet's name, okay? If you're over here, it's not going to maybe do it. Sometimes it will. But if the smaller the slope gets, the harder it gets to know which one you're clicking. So I always recommend going right over top of it. So we know this one's a 7. And that's pretty much it for our steep roof charge. So when you're done, you can just press the escape key like that. And that way you're not still in that dropping line items mode. And you can see them right down here. And we would obviously move those and this ridge cap item up into the rear and left slope category. But we're not done yet. We know that according to this, it says that we have 32 solar panels on the rear and left slopes. So I can simply go back to here. We can see that if we go to just type in solar panel, that we have detach and reset. They are electric. Okay, and I can just, right click here and I can put 32. Okay, and click OK, and boom, there it is. We got 32 of those in there. That's detach and reset, but you also need, let's see if it appears under similar items, the solar panel mounting hardware, detach and reset. Okay, this is per each panel. Okay, see here, any on-site labor to basically remove the mounting hardware, labor cost to detach a solar electric panels mounting hardware. There you go. And then add all those. It's fine. Boom. Need some pipe jacks. Right click, just make it replace only. And I think we said we had 2 of those. Maybe there was, let's see what it says. 2 pipe jacks. All right, sure. There goes that. That's in there. And what else does it say we have? It says that we have plastic ridge vents. All right. So I'll just go to ridge vent, continuous shingle over shingle ridge vent. And these are remove and replace. And I can just go like that, and it should, hold on here. I got to right click, and I got to make this 0.8 R. And then it should, let's see here. All right, and now I'm just going to make that 0.8 R. Sometimes they're a little bit finicky. You could see there as an example of one where I figured out a way to drop it in the sketch, but it might as well have been easier for me to just go back over to here into the estimate and to put, put it there. And yes, so it's 80% of the ridge. That'd be 0.8 R, or you can do R times 0.8. Doesn't matter. Same thing. And that's going to be remove and replace when we're doing a partial roof replacement, because we want to use caution not to damage the undamaged sides of the roof that we're not replacing. Okay, and that would go there. I'd probably put that right underneath my hip and ridge cap line item. Okay, and what else do we have? We'll go to sketch and see. It says that I'm going to
That
make
was
this
for
smaller.
all those ridges, Mike?
These are all hips. So this
Okay.
is good. This is my ridge. This is my ridge. This is a ridge right here, and that's a ridge there. The rest are all hips.
Okay.
So we went through and individually accounted for this. A ridge vent's only going to go on the top ridge. Okay.
I'm with you.
So according to according to the Hague Society, a hip is actually technically called a ridge hip. Okay, but I want you to really just kind of remember this ridge hip as a hip, and this ridge as what we call ridge. That is common practice. But engineers will call a ridge hip, or will call a hip a ridge hip. So, yeah.
I was more asking, you did measuring on the ridge shingles and reduced it down to only the affected areas. And then you went 80% of the entire roof ridge.
Yeah, well, so I know with ridge, because I am replacing my back slopes, and I know because I'm replacing 1/2 of a 4-sided roof, that means that I'm going to be replacing all of my ridge, because I'm replacing, and unless there were some cutouts or build outs, like if I had a little roof that was like this, kind of came out from the side. All right. I mean, then I might have to go through and manually calculate, but I don't have that. In this situation, I have to where, in this instance, I would be replacing all of my ridge, but only part of my hips. So, like, for instance, these hips right here, I'm not going to replace that hip. So
I'm
if
with
we
you
go,
now. It's the
as we go into
ridge
this
hip
view,
versus the ridge. Gotcha. Yeah.
yep. So that's a hip, and then this is a ridge right here. And then this is a ridge right here. This would be a hip. That's a ridge. Yep. So if you think of ridge, the top of a
Thank
head,
you.
and hips, the waist, like the
I'm with
waist of
you.
a body. Yeah. Okay. Other thing that we will need to make sure of, oh, looks like those one underneath that. My mistake. It's supposed to go underneath right there. Let's see here. Okay, that's 32. All right, guys. So we're looking at this thing at estimate view. This is where we're at so far. You can see that it's a little more challenging for us to do this estimate because we have to keep referring back to the sketch, and we're not done yet. So we got to refer back to the sketch for valley metal because valleys have to be water barriered either by flashing or by using ice and water barrier to prevent water from coming in, because those are the most common areas that water come into homes is at the end of valleys. So, and this would be a valley. Okay. So again, valleys where it V's down. So if we look here, I put this in 3D. This right here is called a valley between these two. Between this roof and this roof, this is a valley. All right. So that's a valley. This would be a hip right here. What we're seeing going up right here. And then this would be the ridge. Okay. So in this instance, we have to replace only 26 feet, 6 inches of valley. So I added that in right there. Let me just bring that up. So we got the valley metal one there. It's going to be remove and replace. How much? 26 feet, 6 inches. And I'm going to be now dragging these line items, 78 through 85, right up to here, because they are categorized underneath rear and left slope. And then there's our right slope. Okay. I usually like to keep my steep charge at the end of a slope or at the end of a roof estimate, and then everything else follows. I like to keep my, well, first let's go to estimate view so it's easier for you to see. Then I like to keep my metals or flashings together. So I might put this by drip edge. I like to keep my hip cap with the ridge vent and my ridge and hip cap with the ridge vent, because they both are kind of parallel together. They're not going to be the same calculation, but they go hand in hand. The ridge cap is installed over top of that plastic ridge vent, and then it is installed over top of the hips, but there is no ventilation on the hips. So that's why there's a huge difference in the quantity between these two, because there is no ventilation on hips. And only 80% of the ridge is going to be ventilated. So we have the solar panels in there. I think the only thing we're missing is our satellite dish, right? According to that scope, we said there is a satellite dish right here. So we got to add that. We'll go back to estimate, main roof. We're pretty much done having to do the graphical estimating, and you can see why it was necessary to do it that way. It's really the only way we can get the right numbers, unless you have an eagle view. If you have an eagle view, you don't have to do it that way. All that comes on the eagle view. But if we're actually pulling in an ESX sketch that we get from RoofRx or from Hover, and or maybe you get the actual ESX sketch from Eagle View, and you want that included in your estimate as a diagram you're going to have to do it that way then. Okay, we have the estimate now written for the roof, as you can see here, and we followed their company guidelines. Now, this structure was built in 2014. We know that because we use Redfin or Realtor.com, and we can see that, okay, it was built in 2016. It actually burnt down when I lived there in 2014 and was rebuilt. And that's what it was rebuilt as. It was a total loss house fire. And then so you're able to get information about the risk and for your GLR, such as square footage, how many bedrooms, what the brick veneer is, type of shingle, all that. And sometimes if you have a total loss, it's good to keep in mind you have all these photos that you could reference to write your report or to write your estimate if it's a total loss. And you just get the roof from Eagle View, and now you can figure out the footprint and everything else, which I have done in the past. But now we'll go back to our estimate. You can see how I figured out how much to depreciate it by. And I'm going to select all these, and I'm going to hit this right here, global changes. Anytime you do a global change, you're doing a global change because you have more than one line item, oftentimes a group of line items, associated with the same action. In this case, we're associating it with depreciation. You'll see there's also coverages. There's also factoring, which you'll never do. There's also overhead and profit and tax, which you will do. We're going to remove overhead and profit from the roof according to their guidelines, right? Their guidelines said that if we had overhead and profit on the roof, that was not allowed. So it'd be no overhead and profit. Go back to depreciation. It's by age and condition. And if it was built in 2016, built in 2016, burned down in 2014, then it is 7 years old. Condition, we said it was good or average, and depreciation is recoverable because it's an RCV policy, which means replacement cost value. So there we go. Depreciation is all right here. So everything's been depreciated. The things that haven't been depreciated, it's because they're not material. So this carrier only depreciates material. And so it's oftentimes associated with labor, which is why the global change did not depreciate it. And so you'll see, like, for your steep charges, your satellite dish, your solar panels, all that stuff is not depreciable according to their guidelines. What else do we need to look at here? Other thing would be for this might be labor minimums, making sure that those are okay. You wouldn't want this selected because we have plenty of money on the roof for us to, have it that way. All right, now we are done with the roof. We're going to say there was interior water damage. Okay, so we are moving to the interior, and we have a very simple scope that we're looking at here. Okay, so we're done with roof. Now we're looking at how do they want interior water damage written. All right, so here we can see that it tells us scope. Drywall ceiling is heavy textured and 32 square feet of it was damaged. The carpet and pad for the flooring was also damaged, and they want us to replace it. And the materials are 7 years old and in average condition. All right, so if we look here at this sketch very closely, we have water damage right next to a ceiling fan. As you can see, that means we're going to have to detach and reset this ceiling fan in order to do a repair on that ceiling. It's the only way to do it. We could just say it's a little bit closer for the sake of this. Yeah. Okay. If it were like right there, yeah, because this is the affected area. We got contents in there. You can see we have couches and sofas, so we got to remove content. But how does this carrier want us to do painting and all that other stuff? Well, it says in their guidelines. So we're going to go to our guideline sheet and look at that. And we can see here, according to interior section, we'll scroll down. They want us to use PNT mask LF when painting the ceiling. It means they want us to mask around the perimeter. Okay, so this is the category code. This is the selector code. Okay, and that's only when painting the ceiling. That would be, it means you're covering the walls. You're protecting the walls from any paint or debris because there's no damage to them. Now, they want us to mask the floor with 10 mil plastic sheeting, which would be category PNT and selector code mask SF greater than symbol when we are painting the walls or doing repairs to just the walls. In this case, we're going to be using this one, because we do have ceiling damage, 32 square feet of it. This is the kind of line item they want to use for content removal from a room. There's other line items that you could use, like CONLAB, which is content labor manipulation, but this carrier wants us to use this one. And then when we are sealing the replaced drywall that we just replaced, they want us to use PNT S, category PNT selector S. So that's a spot seal stain blocker. And then when we are done sealing that affected area, they then want us to paint the entire surface, whether that be a ceiling or wall. In this case, it's a ceiling, 2 coats of paint, and add final cleanup if drywall work is being performed, in which case there is drywall. There's going to be debris and everything. Use graphical estimating, also known as roll out estimating in Xactware. And we'll go over that when we are applying waste to the carpet or when we are replacing carpet. And then if we don't have an ITEL, then everything is standard grade unless we have an ITEL sample for it. That's how a lot of carriers are nowadays. So oftentimes people are putting in average grade items, but if we don't have an ITEL, there's a lot of carriers that are now saying, well, we're saying it's standard grade, you should have grabbed an ITEL. ITEL is a sample that you take of a material to send off to a laboratory to figure out exactly what the cost is for the material, and we input that manually into Xactimate later on. We'll go over that in another lesson. And for labor minimums, we're only allowed to have a maximum of 3 labor minimums applied. Okay, so with all that said, we're going to go back now to the estimate, and we're going to look here. We're going to see where we're at. All right, well, first thing we should do is let's go over here to our estimate, and let's delete these line items. Let's create a new one. All right, so I'm going to just delete these so we can start new. All right. First thing we're going to do is we're going to say, all right, content room. You guys see how I'm able to do this part in the estimate section of the project because this part doesn't require us to graphically estimate, except for the carpet, which we will do at the end. So this will be content room. It's a large room. Look at the size of it. It is a sunroom that's 19 by like 14. So yeah, I'd say that's pretty large. So we're going to do CON room greater than symbol, large room. Okay. You don't have to worry about dragging these until the end, but if it bothers you, you can drag them as soon as you drop it, but it might take more time. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to be repairing the drywall surface on the ceiling, and they don't want us, we would not use DRY mask LF. No. They're saying PNT mask LF. It's important to know because there is a difference in price. And that's going to be perimeter ceiling. Okay. So we got that right there. Let's say we got an AC register on this on the ceiling there that we might have to detach and reset. A lot of the homes in the South do. The air is not coming up through the floors, it's coming up from the attic. HVAC attics being installed, or HVAC systems being installed in the attic, and the ductwork coming from the attic. Not always. You have some crawl spaces and stuff that happen down there, but if you're prone to flooding, you won't typically see that. So yeah, that's probably on the ceiling. We got to detach and reset that. Okay. You guys notice how you don't have to memorize all the selector codes, that I'm able to use this search bar simply by typing in what I'm looking for, ceiling fan, detach and reset. Why am I doing that? Well, this image says there's a ceiling fan right there. We got to get that out of the way to replace this damaged drywall. All right. So now that we got that done, that's pretty much prep work. All right, now we'll work our way into this ceiling category. All right, so we got usually by industry standard, 5/8 of an inch drywall on the ceiling, and it's a heavy textured ceiling. Got it. Heavy texture, ready for paint, 32 square feet. Okay, there's 2 different ways to do this. I can write this way. Okay, where it's like that, or I can say, you know what, I want to apply a little bit additional texture for blending. And maybe I want the amount of texture that I'm applying to be greater than the amount of drywall that is being replaced. And I want it to maybe increase by 10%. Well, then I would not include texture with the 5/8 drywall. Instead, I would write texture as a separate line item. Okay. And I would say it's 32, because that's how many square feet the affected area is, times 1.1. And then I would F9 note that to say additional texture for blending. And then that's how another way you can do it. So you'll be able to see when we go over here to the quantity that there's a greater amount of texture, and you have F9 noted it to help them understand additional texture for blending. So that's whenever you're applying that texture on the ceiling and you're trying to make it look all nice, you might need more than 32 square feet to have it go off the edges of that replaced section. Okay. So now that we're done with that, well, it's a one-story home and we had damage to the insulation. So we would probably need to replace that too, right? It's not, there's an attic above it. We had water come in. We don't need to have documentation of the insulation damage. It's one of those few things that insurance says, although it's assumed, we'll allow it. Now, if you were in that attic and there was absolutely no insulation at all, well, guess what? You would still add it because insulation is required by code, but you would put it under code upgrade coverage. All right. But so INS, and this is going to be blown, it's probably blown insulation in there, and it's probably blown 12 to an R30, maybe R38. Okay. But I typically say R30 value for ceilings. And I'm going to put that then right there. And I'm not going to make that C. I'm going to make that the same as the affected area. All right, so we got our insulation, we got our drywall, we have our drywall texture, and now we need our seal. Seal the wall and ceiling with latex stain blocker. It's going to be the same amount of same as the amount of drywall being replaced. And then we have to finally paint the entire ceiling 2 coats as they requested in their guidelines. And now we have to where the ceiling is done. If you had crown molding or anything like that, you know, there might be a chance you might have to detach and reset crown molding. But if we look here at our sketch, it looks like the damage was in the center of the room by the ceiling fan. It was not over by the edges. If you have damage by the edges here, you may sometimes have to paint the walls too. That's also happens on occasion, but it would have to affect the wall. John, you got a question?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Wouldn't you seal the at 35.2 since you have new texture?
Yeah, so I tried to get away with that, but with a lot of carriers, and they say, look, we understand the texture thing, but we're not painting that same amount of area. And I'm like, okay, fine. They just want, they just care about that. I know, but it's up to them. It's up to them. But they just want the exact amount of drywall being replaced to be the amount that gets that stain blocker on it, because they're allowing 2 coats here. So that's kind of how they do that. I know, man. You can try arguing it, I guess, but this is all I've been able to get away with yet. QA, file reviewers and such, they have rejected that, but that was a very good train of thought. I agree with you on that. All right, so we're done with that. So now we're going to go into carpet. Okay, so there's 2 different ways to add carpet, but this carrier says they want us to add it using the rollout floor method, which is offered by Xactimate, also known as graphical estimating, which is what we were doing earlier. So way 1 is like this: FCC AV, okay, standard grade, remove and replace. Actually, it'd just be replace only, and it would be times 1.1%. That's method 1. Okay. And in fact, I'll make this average grade so that we can I can show you an example and not duplicate the same line item. So we'll just say this is method 1. A lot of carriers use where they just add 10%. This carriers and a lot of carriers are adopting this other method. And this is where we say we are graphically inputting the carpet in here, standard grade, and I want to drop it. Okay, what did that do? When you see line items in purple like this, that means you used graphical estimating, and it is going to have a difference in the remove quantity than it does in the replace. So we can see here that, wow, there is a difference. In fact, if we were to replace carpet and only add 10%, like some carriers still do, well, that brings us to 295 square feet. But if we are to replace carpet using the method that Unicorn Insurance wants us to use, that's an additional, like, 57 feet or something that it's getting on there. And how does that work out? Well, I'll show you. Best way to see how it decided that kind of math is by going right up here where it says floor orientation. I'm hovered right over it. You click that. Now it's showing us rollout B and rollout A and how it decided that. And if you can hover over different edges to get the layout to change. So I can hover over this edge and all of a sudden the layout will change. And let's see what that did to change the replace amount. It didn't really change it. However, it put it in a weird floor orientation that is probably not going to be used. It looks like D, C, and B would be waste with a lot of seams there. It might be used in that method, but I'd say unlikely. I think the most appropriate method with the least amount of seams in the carpeting, which would look the most professional, would be this one right here. And as we can see, that we pretty much have the same amount of carpet waste on that at 352 square feet, which is ultimately much higher than our 10%. So that's why this carrier wants to do it. Guys, this rollout method means this is what the contractor or the carpenter is actually going to do. He's going to roll it out on the floor. And they're all 12 feet long. And he's not going to just, sometimes that 10% waste isn't enough. If you got let's say you got a closet that is 6 feet by 2 feet, and they're just adding 10% waste to that. When we both know that he's going to have a lot of waste on that because that's a small closet, or a 2 by 2 closet. Heck, he's got to get a big 12-foot roll and then roll it. He's going to have a lot of waste. So, you got to pay attention to that in the guidelines, see what you're going to do. But we're going to delete this one here, and we are still missing something. We are still missing padding. All right, so with padding, and nothing has really changed in that sense. It does not have waste applied on the rollout. I think waste is automatically included with padding. So if we go to pad, okay, there's also standard grade. Just press F. You can click on the line item here. You can go to unit, item image, and we can see, and it says that, note, the main material component for this line item includes an assumed waste factor of 4%, meaning that waste is already included on material and labor without showing it in the calculation, like we can see it shown in the calculation here. Okay, so with that said, I believe we have all of our line items except for final cleaning. So this carrier said that they would like us to use final cleaning in our estimates anytime drywall is being repaired. There we go. So we have it. Our prep work, make sure we detach and reset. Smoke detectors, ceiling fans if they are in the way. And then, and if the ceiling fan didn't have to be detached and reset, but it was just in the way of painting, then you might want to use PNT mask light fixture. Okay. And that would be, masking of the ceiling fan. Okay, so that could, but I would think insurance would say it's excessive if I am detaching and resetting it and masking it. They'd say just use common sense and reattach it after the ceiling has been painted. And so that's probably what they'll do in this instance, and I'll remove that. And then, like I said, we got our insulation, our drywall on the ceiling, our painting of the ceiling, and then our carpet replacement. So this part is done. We just have to get rid of this little folder here that we created earlier. Make sure we have debris removal on the estimate. The debris removal is included for everything except the roof. Okay, why is that? That's because if we go to this line item here, unless we choose a different line item, this line item includes dump fees, haul off disposal, and labor to remove 30-year composition shingle and felt. Okay, so we finally now have completed all parts of the estimate. We now just have to make sure, okay, do we need to add depreciation to this? Yeah, we might need to do that. So let's go to global changes. We know it's what, 7 years old. And depreciation types recoverable. Okay, there we go. It's been applied to materials only. Do I want overhead and profit on this? Yes. So you don't have to change that. Overhead and profit is applied by default, but for the sake of this exercise, you can see how I would change it. And that is just by going here to overhead and profit and okay. Okay, we're allowed to have a minimum of 3 labor minimums according to this carrier. So let's check what we have in our labor minimums. Whoa, okay, we have a lot of them there. We don't want all those. Okay, so we're gonna automatically get rid of the ones that say 0 next to them. That means they met their labor minimum or base service charge based on just the line items that are in the estimate already. But these ones here, they still have not met their labor minimum. However, is it being done by a different trade or is it being done by the same contractor, even though it's being called a different trade in Xactimate? For instance, the drywall guy is probably the same guy, the same individual that's going to remove the insulation, because when the drywall falls out, the insulation is going to fall out. It's probably going to put a little bit of insulation back, so we don't need to apply the insulation labor minimum. How about this heat vent and air conditioning labor minimum? Would we apply that when the drywall guy who comes out to do the drywall and painting is the same person detaching and resetting that air register? No. How about the cleaning labor minimum? If that's going to be done by the same trade that's doing the drywall, the painting, and the carpet? No. So that's how that works. So this is really the only one that is warranted. The other ones have either already met their labor minimum amount, which is why they're zeroed out, or they are not warranted because it's being done by the drywall trade. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, well, I believe this is our stopping point, everybody. I did go a little bit over today, but it's because I wanted to get both the water damage and the roof damage into one estimate so you are able to feel more confident now when you go out and not only do a roof estimate, but a water interior damage estimate, okay?